Hello, everyone. We are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And our topic today is nuclear generated electricity overshadows government subsidized wind and solar. This is me, Armando Cavagna, and this is Ronald Stein, Senior Policy Advisor for the Hartman Institute and CFACT, co-author of the Pulitzer Prize-nominated book Clean Energy. He is an engineer. And with us today for the first time is Dave Emerine. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing in a good sense, but you can correct just Dave. Sorry, 1 second here. I need to make bigger. Yeah, graduated in the United States Naval Academy, served as president of Nuclear Fuel Services, and nowadays he provides consulting services to major nuclear agencies and institutions. Um, this is the article they wrote together this week with the same title of our podcast. Welcome, Ronald and David. It's a pleasure.
Thank
Glad
you.
to be aboard.
Great. Let me remove this. Yes. Gentlemen, let me start with a point that's very curious for me. How can you address the demand of electricity in the U.S. for the next decades? It's a big increase or something stable?
It's a big increase. The artificial intelligence, data centers, and they all require continuous, uninterruptible electricity. And wind and solar doesn't provide continuous, uninterruptible electricity. So, yeah, it's overshadowing. Nuclear is zero emission, small footprint of land, and very little materials. Longevity, lifespan is phenomenal compared to wind and solar. So yeah, there's a lot of power needs coming up, but it's for continuous electricity, and that's why it's nuclear is overshadowing the intermittent, weather-dependent wind and solar.
Mm. When
Yeah,
you
I might
mention,
add, Armando,
yeah, sure.
to what Ron said, that, right now the forecast is to increase in the next 25 years at least 25% more than what is required right now. And that's a
25
fun,
in the all 25 years. 25.
yeah.
It's not too much, David.
Well, that's a function of both an increasing population and an expanding economy. But as Ron mentioned, you have other things that are coming on, like AI and even electrical vehicles. And just as an example, 25 years ago, the internet really didn't contribute anything of any significant amount to the
Mm.
national grid. Today, it's 10%.
Wow.
And nobody knew that 25 years ago. So what else is out there that we may not be aware of right now? Like my example with the internet. So the one thing that's absolutely positive is the demand is going up.
Yeah, so 10% only for data centers, for internet, and 25% for the whole 25 years. Yeah, it's a
At
big number.
least.
Yeah, big number. And Ronald, every
Yes.
energy source has drawbacks, of course. Some fossil fuels for one side and the other types of energy on the other side. What you mentioned in the article that the nocive aspects of wind and solar energy. Please bring to us this concept that is very interesting.
Wind and solar requires a lot of land, and when you put these wind and solar facilities in, they're usually out in the boondocks. So you got to get transmission lines to bring it back to where the needs are, where the people are. Massive land requirements. The material and mining requirements is huge, and most of the exotic minerals and metals are coming from developing countries. That's why I wrote that book, Clean Energy Exploitations, because we're exploiting people that have yellow, brown, and black skin in these poor developing countries that are mining for this. They've got very little labor laws, almost non-existent environmental laws. So we're exploiting people that have yellow, brown, and black skin, and the environmental degradation on their land is atrocious. Just so quote, quote, we can go green. And again, it's only for intermittent electricity. And yeah, and there's going to be a recycling challenge too, because the lifespan of wind and solar is limited, a lot less than nuclear. And when these wind turbines need to be refurbished, that's going to be another taxpayer funded effort.
But the other side, fossil fuels, David, has drawbacks at the same time. So how do you compare those things?
Well, let me just expand a little bit on what Ron said. The main problem with wind and solar is its unreliability. If the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, they don't produce electricity. And where we rely on them as a source of electricity, they have to be backed up by very inefficient fossil burning fuel plants. So that's one problem. And the other was land use. Uh, for example, nuclear is very energy dense, and we can talk about that more later. But solar panels
Wind.
and wind turbines require a hell of a lot of land. For example, Davis-Besse, the plant I just mentioned that I get to look at the cooling tower each day, is about 900 megawatts electrical. It would take 8,100 acres of solar panel to equal that. Or it would take a windmill farm a quarter of a mile deep, stretching from Detroit to Buffalo to equal that. So that's a good example of one of the main drawbacks, other than reliability, is the land use.
Yeah, but when we compare natural gas and coal, because as Ronald always says oil is not for electricity, it's for products. But comparing natural gas and coal with wind and solar, the drawbacks of these two sets, how can, Ronald, you compare those?
Well, natural gas is much cleaner. Coal in poor countries is very prevalent. We use coal in the United States to grow the economy, and now we're a wealthy economy, and we can basically get rid of coal and focus on natural gas and nuclear, for our continuous electricity. Developing countries are more likely going to continue coal until they become wealthier countries. Because as David mentioned, all this wind and solar, it's subsidized with taxpayer dollars. But the poor countries, they don't have taxpayer money. They can't subsidize themselves out of a paper bag. So more likely the poor developing countries, they'll continue using coal. And they're building about a coal-fired power plant every week. And they need electricity to get them to join the Industrial Revolution. Once they do, they'll probably convert to what we're doing, natural gas and nuclear.
David, wind and solar are irreversible. So you can reduce this amount of energy from these energies, or you see that can grow slowly.
It can grow. I'm sorry.
Not a strong position. So wind and solar will stay stable, or will they reduce, or will grow?
Well, if I understand your question, you're asking if you can expand the use of wind and solar.
Yeah.
Again, it takes such a tremendous amount of land to use it, and as Ron was pointing out, in the long run, they're ecological disasters. If their lifespan is between 20 and 25 years. For example, in this country right now, we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 wind turbines that have been built, and as Ron pointed out, not one of them would have been built without government subsidy. But of that number, somewhere between 15 and 18,000 stand idle because they need repair or they've run out of their lifespan and they need to be decommissioned, which again is a environmental problem, because what do you do with that material? You end up burying it in landfills, and it's just not an environmental good for the environment. So I don't know if that answers your question,
Yeah.
but I think again, nuclear is so energy dense. A fuel pellet, so from where my one finger intercepts my other one to the end, that's about the size of a fuel pellet. That equals 170 gallons of oil. It equals, I'm trying to remember, a ton of coal and 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. So again, you can see
The density.
how much energy comes from one little fuel pellet.
Yeah. Going to nuclear, as you mentioned, is very interesting because which organizations, institutions you have in the United States that takes care of nuclear power plants? Are they working well, Ronald? Are they strong?
Let me start
Yeah.
off before David chimed in. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they were founded in 1977, but before they were founded, I think between 1954 and 1977, that 23-year period, there was like 100 reactors that were built before the NRC was formed. After the NRC was formed in 1977 to today, that's a 48-year period. No reactors have been built, but they have issued 2 permits. So they're a regulatory organization that just doesn't do anything.
Wow. It's a federal
I'll let
one.
David go from there.
It's not state one, it's federal.
Well,
It's federal, yes.
I wouldn't blame all of that on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. There were a bunch of other contributing factors to that. The NRC came out of the Atomic Energy Commission, and from that eventually came the NRC on one side and the Department of Energy on the other side. And the NRC's role is basically very simple, and that is to make sure that the nuclear reactors are built safe, maintained safe, and operated safe. That's their role. And initially, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the people in the organization were populated primarily by ex-Navy captains and admirals. And these were people who knew how to get things done. And they knew they wanted to make sure that nuclear was safe, but they also wanted to make sure nuclear contributed to our electrical grid. Slowly but surely, over time, those kind of people were replaced by political appointees, some of whom were actually politicians.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and then some of them were very good people that I've been interfaced with over the course of my career, but some of them really didn't have any interest in really promoting the expansion of nuclear. Their attitude was sort of, I can't get in trouble if I don't do anything. And I think under Trump, we're seeing a change in that attitude. And I hope that's the case. But I just wanted to add that to what you said, Ron.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
Ronald.
to add further to that, like you said, the NRC was formed in 77, and just 2 years after that, Jane Fonda came out with the China Syndrome movie about a nuclear meltdown, and that scared the poop out of everybody.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But let me understand. So you mean that the institution to control nuclear power is not necessary, or it is necessary but in the wrong position?
David, you want to take that one?
All right, try one more time. I want to make sure I
Sure,
understand.
sure. So you mean that this kind of institution to control nuclear power installations and safety are necessary to exist or unnecessary?
Well, in my opinion, and I have colleagues that don't necessarily agree with me. I think the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is very important. It has a very important role to play, but it needs to be non-political. It needs to be driven by, like I said earlier, people like retired Navy admirals and captains who know how to get things done, but they know how to do it under the umbrella of safety. There are other organizations that contribute to the development of nuclear, like the Department of Energy, which unfortunately has suffered some of the same things I just ended up describing with regard to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But again, under Trump, I see a change in attitude there as well. Also, an important oversight for nuclear power plants is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. What I've mentioned to people many times, if there's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, now I'm not talking nuclear, I'm talking anything, an overturned chlorine tank, which I actually experienced down in South Carolina, or a very bad storm. The best place you can be is within the 10-mile emergency planning zone of a nuclear power plant, because we are required by FEMA to demonstrate that we can respond to a nuclear accident of some dimension. And all of those skill sets and equipment and people can easily then also respond to a man-made or a natural disaster in that same area.
Got it. We have a comment from the audience. Wind and solar cannot reliably power. Yeah, it's difficult for me to read because it's very small letters. AI data centers, and it's pretty silly to try it, especially on prime farmland where many of these AI data centers plan to be built. Is a comment from the audience. Who wanted to comment this?
That's
Let
a
me make
very
a
good comment. My wife and I were driving to a meeting somewhere, and we had to drive through the countryside in Ohio. Now, Ohio is very much an agricultural state, particularly in Northwest Ohio. And I remember driving by acre after acre after acre of solar panels, which, by the way, it was at night, so they weren't doing anything except taking up a lot of land. And so this observation is excellent.
Yeah, good. We cannot identify the person if the person wanted to put the name here to be known. It's okay.
let me make a comment about what David mentioned about
Sure.
the Navy's presence in the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The U.S. Navy, they got a 70-year track record of safety with nuclear, because all the aircraft carriers, all the submarines, for 70 years have been nuclear powered, and there've been no fatalities, no injuries that we know of, and the operators, the engineers, the maintenance personnel, they're all highly screened, monitored, and yeah, like you say, we got a 70-year track record, and it's amazing that. Have you ever seen an aircraft carrier? That is one big ship. You look at it, it's like, "Ah, you're going to move this thing," But yeah, they're nuclear powered, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's phenomenal.
In your article, you mentioned SUNF instead of nuclear waste. What is this
Slightly used.
concept?
Well, the current reactors, it's slightly used nuclear fuel, SUNF. And the slightly used nuclear fuel is they've been able to extract, as David mentioned in his little fingertip, about 5% of the energy. Today, fast reactors are able to get like 90% out of it. So the slightly used nuclear fuel is only 5% used, and there's a lot of energy left in it.
Oh,
And
okay.
today's technology with these fast reactors, yeah, that we can extract the other 95%.
So the idea is to extract, to capture the remaining energy in the waste before you definitive.
Yeah, it would take reprocessing of that spent nuclear fuel, which right now sits either in spent fuel cooling pools, where it sits normally after being taken out of the reactor for 7 years to cool both thermally and radioactively. And then it's stored in very secure containers and put on concrete pads. It's very secure. But as Ron pointed out, there's 90 to 95% of the usable uranium still in that. They are removed from the reactor because of very conservative calculations with regard to the irradiation of the zirconium pins that house those little fuel pellets that I mentioned. They don't want those to crack and allow the fission products to get into the primary coolant, even though there's two more barriers after the primary barrier. So with very conservative calculations, they remove them again with only 90-95% of the uranium consumed. If we were to recover that in what's called reprocessing and recycling and using it again, there would still be a slight amount of radioactive material that we would have to dispose of. Two things on that. First thing is, I was the program manager for the Defense Waste Processing Facility at the Savannah River site in South Carolina. We brought that plant online in 1997 for the sole purpose of processing the highly radioactive waste from the nuclear weapons program. And basically what we did is we combined that waste with liquid borosilicate glass and pour it into stainless steel containers and then seal those containers and hang them in concrete vaults. We've been doing that safely since 1997. So we know what to do with that. Now, if all the energy in the United States was produced from nuclear, all the electrical energy that we need, and then we recycled that fuel, as Ron mentioned earlier, that we should be doing to gain that 90-95% for future use, the amount of waste for the entire United States would cover a single football field 10 feet high. And that's what we would have to manage, and we know exactly how to manage that. So nuclear waste is not the problem at all. And you go by a coal-fired plant, and I'm not saying we shouldn't operate coal-fired plants, but you got acres of slag and used material, and you do none of that with nuclear plants.
What generation of nuclear reactors we are at this time? The best one is at the third generation, and the number 4 is coming. Is it true?
Yeah, right now, all of the reactors in the United States, and for that matter, I think, I'm pretty sure for the whole world, are what are called Generation 3 reactors. And they're usually boiling water reactors or pressurized water reactors. The Generation 4 reactors, and I think in the United States we have 6 different designs under consideration by both the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, have a lot of advantages over our present Generation 3, the great big reactors with the great big cooling towers. And I might also add the great big containments. Those Generation 4 reactors should lend themselves very well to smaller, what are called small modular reactors. And they should have some more what would be called inherent safety features, where you could reasonably say that you wouldn't need those robust containments or all those redundant safety systems that are necessary for the Generation 3 reactors, but very, very expensive. They really drive the costs up. Also, the Generation 4 reactors, they would have other potential advantages like factory assembly and disassembly, and then deliver it to the reactor site. Speaking of the reactor sites, we have a number of reactor sites, Davis, Bessie, and Perry here in Ohio, that were licensed for 2 or 3 reactors, and only have one reactor operating, that land could be used for these small modular reactors, and you would not have to go through the licensing process for the land. You'd still have to go through the licensing process for the reactor, but you could avoid the cost for the licensing process for the land and the area because that's already been done. So there are lots of advantages, and I've just mentioned a few of them for the Generation 4 reactors. And there's, like I said, maybe as many as 6 different designs under consideration right now.
Ronald, nuclear energy is a free market or a state-driven investment?
Right now, it's government stagnated electricity. We got to get the government out of the electrical business because right now the government is in the electrical business and they're pushing wind and solar. But the nuclear, if we don't take advantage, we're going to lose our leadership in that arena to Russia and China. They both have small modular reactors coming online, and we're sitting here talking about it.
Yeah, but are there subsidies to nuclear energy like in wind and solar, or is different?
No, it's just for wind and solar and EVs. That's the taxpayer subsidies.
Oh,
And the
Yeah,
government looks
yeah,
at it's unfunded. I mean, it's unlimited funding. Taxpayers,
oh yeah, sure.
need more money.
Big numbers.
Get it from the taxpayers.
yeah. I might add to what Ron said. We've had administrations, both Republican and as well as Democrat, which have sponsored this thing called, at this time, is called global warming. I mean, climate change. It was global warming, and it's been a number of things over time. And so the focus has been on wind turbines and solar panels. And nuclear sort of kind of been sitting on the sidelines rather than being promoted by the different political parties. So it's been a very political thing. I'm happy to say that right now, Donald Trump is trying to turn that around. He's addressing speeding up the licensing, still making it safe. He wants to have about another 300 megawatts of nuclear by 2050. They're looking at different reactor designs. We're looking at getting both the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to be much more apolitical and much more energy devoted. Looking at spent fuel the spent fuel management that we discussed a little bit. He set a goal, I think, 300 gigawatts by 2050, and so forth. The problem that we really also need to address is the role that we had back in the 50s and 60s when we exported nuclear power. We set the safety and quality standards. And as Rod said, we've sort of relinquished that now to China and to Russia. And I have a concern about whether or not their leadership will maintain those very high standards in quality and safety. So it's very important for us, for a number of reasons, to really support nuclear development, nuclear power in this country, and get back to an international leadership role that we had before.
Interesting, because you
Amen.
mentioned
Amen.
China and Russia. And my point, Ronald, if China, Russia, Europe, are they investing in nuclear, or they do not believe in nuclear as the US is doing?
No, they're investing in nuclear,
Oh yeah,
and they're moving forward.
Oh,
We're
Yeah.
moving backwards. They're moving forward.
yeah, great. Marco Arcifa, I would say nuclear power is mainly a timing problem. It's only to make it in the right time with the right technology. What do you think?
Who said that?
Marco Arcifa.
Somebody commented.
Yeah, it's a comment. Can you read it? Can you see it at
Oh,
the screen?
well,
I don't see
it's
it.
more than a timing problem. It's unfortunately China and Russia have the advantage in when it comes to financing nuclear power plants. They use government financing. In this country, we are trying to maintain free enterprise, and so it's a little more challenging than when you have state-sponsored uh, nuclear development. So I don't think it's just a timing problem. I think it's really a leadership problem. And like I said, I'm glad to see that Trump's taking a very proactive role in his administration. Obviously, the big question is, okay, well, what happens in 4 years?
Yeah, no doubts.
And that's the unfortunate thing. And I've had this discussion with Ron. This country, back in 1974, I remember we were subject to an oil embargo, and gas skyrocketed from 25 cents a gallon to 75 cents a gallon. And all of a sudden the light went on. We don't have a cogent, consistent national energy strategy, including electrical generation. Here we sit today, we still don't have a national cohesion energy strategy. And we desperately need that so that the devotion to our energy grid, our electrical energy grid, and whatever the power sources are, and of course, Ron and I sponsor nuclear, is consistent from one administration to the next administration. Without that national energy strategy that both parties would be devoted to, we don't have that.
But
It goes
why?
up and down.
Why? What's the reason that do not have a strategy for nuclear? What's the reason?
Well, let me expand upon what David mentioned. I think we really need two national strategies, one for electricity and one for the products that drives the economy. Because right now, a lot of government funding and subsidies are going toward wind and solar because those people believe that wind and solar is going to replace fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's right.
But as we talked about before, wind and solar only generates electricity. So we need an electricity national policy. Are we going to go wind and solar? Are we going to go nuclear, coal, natural gas? And then on the product side, all the products that operate hospitals, airports, build to the ships, where do those products come from? We haven't got a backup plan for that
Come
one.
from China.
They will, because China has, I think, 8 new refineries coming online by 2030. So they'll be basically providing the
Yes, exactly.
derivatives for all the products that we use in
Exactly.
our daily lives.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's really a product national policy and an electricity national policy.
Interesting. Very good point. Very good point. And we have
Right
a
now,
comment.
for electricity, we have options.
Mhm.
You have 6 different options. But the interesting thing is, with electricity, you got solar, wind, natural gas, coal, hydro, nuclear. All 6 ways to generate electricity are very similar. They all have pieces and parts that are made from oil. They
Mhm.
don't exist without wires and insulation and computers.
Sure.
So if the government wants to get rid of oil, they're going to get rid of electricity. There'll be no pieces and parts to make the computers.
Yeah, my point is why we do not have a strategy for both things.
I think it's energy, lack of energy literacy among our leaders.
Oh, oh,
And part of it is because, they keep talking about wind and solar energy is going to replace fossil fuels. Armando, we talked about this before. They do different things.
No doubt.
Wind and solar generates electricity. They don't make any products. And
Mhm.
so it's the current leadership is
Mhm.
it's a lack of intelligence, and until we can get some intelligence, and right now I think there is some intelligence in the
And,
White House
and,
in getting us in this direction.
and do other countries have this kind of a strategy clearly?
They're they're doing everything that we're not doing.
Well, unfortunately, we seem to be much better at responding than we do at planning.
Mhm.
And that's why I say that energy strategy, a plan for the future,
Yeah, that's right.
recognizing all the different aspects of energy, and in particular, our electrical grid and how it's powered.
Mhm.
We really need that strategy that bridges the different administrations as they come and go.
That's right. We have a comment from the audience. SRB. How much does the U.S. still depend on Russia for processing of uranium?
That's a very good question. And unfortunately, I really don't know the current answer to that, but I know it's more than it should be. Uh, One of the things that we don't have that would fit into that plan and would allow us to start to divorce ourselves from any dependence on Russia is enrichment. We need to be able to enrich the uranium, uh, which is predominantly 238, but what we use in reactors is uranium 235. Right now, we depend on other countries for that enrichment,
Yeah,
one of which is Russia.
it's a weak
So,
point.
yeah.
This,
You think Putin's going to tell us?
yeah, but this let's see. So the dependence on Russia for this uranium is something that makes the U.S. Weak or sensible.
I think it's a national security risk.
Yeah.
I
By
do. I
having all the
agree. But we could
yeah.
enrich uranium from other places besides Russia.
Oh,
But some of those places we've been getting it from, the plants that do the enrichment are, 50, 60 years old, and they're on their last leg. So that's an issue as well. We really need to develop and expand enrichment in this country so we're not dependent on anyone else.
going to the final point for me, of course, you can bring more points if you want. Do you expect for the next 4 years this, let's say, trend in American policies to establish nuclear as a strong energy system in the United States? But in 4 years, as David mentioned before, we can stop and revert these policies. How do you see this possibility and these risks?
Well, we're getting a lot of support from the White House today. And I think the United States is going to start recognizing there's a lot of movement in South Africa for small modular reactors. Um, yeah, nuclear is being developed around the world, and we're going to be
Right.
reading about it instead of being proactive about it. We'll be reacting, as David mentioned, to what's happening around the world. So, yeah, I think foreign countries are proceeding at warp speed, and we'll be following rather than leading.
David?
Yeah, which is what Ron just said is absolutely really too bad. And I'm hopeful that the Trump administration is going to kickstart this whole thing. And there's every evidence that they are. And then I hope it's maintained, whether it's Republican or Democrat, in the next administration,
Yeah.
because we need to have energy independence, we need to have energy security, and an absolute must in that formula is nuclear energy.
Mhm.
And that electricity has to be continuous and uninterruptible. And that's exactly what wind and solar do not provide.
Yeah,
Right.
that's great.
Right.
Paula Kerber, good afternoon. Yes, for you too. Welcome with questions, Paula Kerber. You are a very tricky maker questions. I love your questions. Okay. May I ask each one to make a wrap up, make a final comments on nuclear energy, the trends, the participation on electricity in the United States for the next time, and how do you see a final comment for you?
Well, I'm actually working on an op-ed I think might help this movement. It's basically a bunch of questions because all the elected officials, from the mayors, the governors, the House of Representatives, the senator, president, vice president, there's going to be a lot of interviews on television, ABC, NBC, CNN, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm really trying to provide the ammunition for the people doing the interviews, like the Armandos. These are the questions that have to be asked of the people running for office. And a lot of the questions are really geared around the fact that, wind and solar is not going to do the job. And you got to basically face it, it's not going to do the job. And I think they'll be unable to defend the wind and solar, that hopefully that'll put us back into the leadership position. I think Trump is probably one step ahead of what I see coming out of all those interviews, or it can be broadcast around the world. How do you provide continuous electricity?
Good.
And I guess my contribution to close would be that we, and by we I mean the utility industry, as well as our government, need to do a much, much, much better job of educating the public. We need to start in the grade schools and the colleges, as well as in publications. And there are, agencies devoted to that, but we really need to put a large emphasis on informing the public how safe nuclear is, how nuclear waste, as I mentioned before, is just a non-issue, and how reliable nuclear is, particularly relative to others. But mostly, what's and on people's mind is it safe? Do we have a solution for the waste? Is it reliable? We need to really educate people so they can get behind it, instead of listening to things that are published that are absolutely not true in a lot of the press. So that's
I think
another going forward.
summarizing what Dave was saying, we're really talking about energy wisdom conversations.
Yeah.
And I think we'll start by asking the people running for office these open-ended questions, and they got to be talked about among the professors, the teachers, the students, your friends at the dinner table. It's got to be conversations, because face reality, and it really comes down to wisdom.
Ronald, let me add something for you. Not only wisdom, but scientific based.
Exactly.
Because sometimes it's more ideological than scientific, and this is a big problem.
Right. Yeah. Political decisions are usually not
Exactly.
scientific decisions.
We have one more point from Paula Kerber. Data centers, gentlemen, needs energy, and sun and wind cannot provide. Nuclear energy is the future. Wow.
True.
I would just change one word. I would change energy to electricity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wind and solar is not going to provide the electricity. Nuclear will be.
That's great. Thank you so much, David Emerine and Ronald Stein. As always, a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Have a happy holiday season.
You too.
Buonasera.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.